All right, let's jump right in. Today, we're taking a deep dive into cash flow real estate investing.
Sounds exciting.
It is, especially if you're thinking about becoming a landlord. We're going through this document that breaks down all the tasks involved. It's pretty detailed, almost like a roadmap for real estate success.
Yeah, and there are a lot of tasks, 50 to be exact.
50. Wow, that's a lot to handle.
It really drives home the point that this isn't some passive income dream.
No, definitely not a get-rich-quick scheme,
It's about building a real business.
and that takes work. But don't worry, we're going to break down the most important parts. We're going to figure out what really matters when it comes to making money in this game.
Because just buying a property doesn't guarantee success.
Exactly. So first things first, let's get the big picture. Cash flow real estate, it's basically about buying properties and renting them out for income.
Right. Right. But the source really stresses that this isn't a passive investment. It takes planning, management, and constant learning.
So it's not just collecting rent checks.
No, it's much more involved than that. It all starts with finding good tenants. Those are your bread and butter.
Yeah, I can imagine bad tenants would be a nightmare.
Absolutely. Think about it. Tenants who are constantly late with rent or damaging the property, that's a cash flow killer.
So how do we avoid that? What's the key to attracting and keeping those awesome rent-paying tenants?
Well, the source talks a lot about tenant screening, and it's not just a quick glance at a credit score.
No.
It's a deep dive into their financial history, background checks, verifying employment and income, even contacting previous landlords.
Like a super thorough background check.
Exactly. You're bringing someone into your business. It should be a good fit for both sides.
Makes sense. You want someone who's responsible and reliable.
Absolutely. And the source provides a framework for asking the right questions and gathering all that information. It helps you make an informed decision.
Okay, so let's say we found that perfect tenant. They've passed the screening with flying colors. What's next?
Now you need a solid lease agreement.
To protect both sides.
Yes, and the source is very clear about this. A clear, comprehensive lease is crucial. It prevents misunderstandings and disputes later on.
What kind of details should be in there?
Everything. Think about those what-if situations. Like, what happens if the plumbing goes haywire? Who's responsible for repairs?
What about late rent or, pet policies?
Exactly. All of that needs to be spelled out. The more specific, the better. Because remember, this is a legally binding document.
It's better to be prepared than to have to deal with those issues later.
Absolutely.
All right, so we've got great tenants and a solid lease, but we still need to make sure the property's actually making money.
Right. Of course. Attracting good tenants is just the first step. Next, we have to focus on the financials, on making sure the numbers work in your favor.
Okay, let's talk money. How do we turn this property into a cash cow?
The source highlights a couple of important strategies. The first one is rent adjustments.
So increasing the rent.
Well, it's more about staying competitive. You need to make sure your rental income keeps up with the market.
I guess things change all the time.
Exactly. So the source recommends researching rental rates for comparable properties in your area. See what similar units are renting for, what amenities they offer, the location. All these things play a role.
So it's finding that balance between charging a fair rate and attracting tenants while also making sure you're maximizing your income.
Right. And that might mean adjusting your rent over time, especially if the market changes.
Okay, I'm all for making more money, but we can't forget about the expenses that come with owning a property.
You got it. And that's where the source emphasizes strategic property upgrades. It's about investing in your property, boosting its value, and potentially attracting even better tenants.
So these aren't just costs, but opportunities.
Exactly. The key is to be strategic. The source recommends focusing on upgrades that appeal to your ideal tenant and things that offer a good return on investment.
So like a modern kitchen if you're targeting young professionals. Or a fenced-in backyard for families.
Exactly. Think about what will make your property stand out.
All right, so we've talked about attracting good tenants, getting a solid lease in place, and strategically managing rent and upgrades to make sure the property is profitable. What else do we need to consider?
That's a lot already. What about the nitty-gritty of actually managing the property?
You mean the less glamorous stuff, like budgeting, collecting rent, and navigating all the legal and financial maze?
Uh-oh, sounds complicated.
Yeah, we'll dive into all of that in the next part. Get ready for the nitty-gritty.
Buckle up, everyone. We'll be back soon with more deep dive into cash flow real estate investing. Okay, we're back. Last time we were talking about finding great tenants and getting that rental income flowing.
Right, but there's more to being a landlord than just that.
Yeah, I bet. It's not all sunshine and roses. What does the source say about the whole management side of things?
Well, it really emphasizes having systems and processes in place.
Systems,
Yeah.
processes. Sounds a bit corporate for real estate.
Think of it as creating a framework so you can handle all those recurring tasks efficiently. Okay, give me an example.
Rent collection, for instance. Instead of chasing down late payments every month, you could have a system where tenants pay online.
So everything is automated.
Exactly. You could track payments easily, send reminders if needed. Same thing for maintenance requests, a system for receiving them, figuring out what's urgent. It just makes things run smoother.
Okay, I see how that would save time and headaches. So where do we start? What system should we tackle first?
Well, since we're all about that cash flow, let's start with budgeting.
Budgeting, huh? Makes sense. I guess you can have the best tenants in the world, but if you're not careful with your finances, you could still end up losing money.
Exactly. And the source goes into detail about creating a budget for your rental property.
Yeah.
First, you got to understand your income and expenses.
Income is pretty straightforward, right? Rent payments.
Yes, but you also need to consider things like vacancy rates.
Vacancy rates.
Yeah. You can't assume your property will be occupied 100% of the time. There'll be periods when it's empty between tenants. You need to factor that in.
Right. Even the best tenants eventually move out.
Exactly. Then there are expenses. You've got your fixed costs like the mortgage, property taxes, insurance.
And then those variable costs, the ones you can't always predict.
Right, like utilities, repairs, and maintenance. Those can fluctuate.
See, this is where it starts to feel overwhelming. So many things to think about.
And that's why the source emphasizes being thorough and realistic. It's better to overestimate those expenses than to be caught off guard later.
Better to be safe than sorry.
Ah,
Okay, so we've created a budget, we're keeping track of our money, but how do we ensure that rent is actually coming in on time?
the million-dollar question. Efficient rent collection. This is crucial, and the source has some really helpful advice.
Lay it on me. I need all the tips and tricks.
The first thing is setting clear expectations from the get-go. Make sure your lease clearly states the rent amount, the due date, how to pay, and any late fees.
No room for confusion.
Exactly. The source also recommends offering multiple payment options, online portals, bank transfers, even good old-fashioned checks. The easier it is for tenants to pay, the better.
That makes sense. But let's be real, even with the best systems, sometimes tenants are late. What happens then?
You need a clear late rent policy, and you have to be consistent. If the rent's not paid on time, send a friendly reminder.
And if it's still late?
Then you impose the late fee as outlined in the lease.
So it's a balance of understanding but also firmness. You don't want to be a tyrant, but you have to protect your investment.
Exactly. And if a tenant consistently doesn't pay and communication breaks down, you might have to consider eviction.
Eviction, yikes. Definitely a last resort. But I guess it's good to know the process, just in case.
It's important to understand your rights as a landlord. And that brings us to another critical area, knowing those landlord-tenant laws.
Ugh, the legal stuff always makes my head spin.
I hear you. But you gotta remember, you're running a business here, and that means following the rules.
Right, ignorance is not a valid excuse in court. What are some of those key legal things I need to be aware of?
Fair housing laws are at the top of the list. You can't discriminate against tenants based on race, religion, national origin, family status, disability, or sex.
So no refusing to rent to a family because they have kids or because of their religion.
Exactly. Everyone deserves a fair shot.
Makes sense. What else?
Building codes and safety regulations, those are important too. Things like working smoke detectors, proper ventilation, safe wiring.
Right, you want to make sure the property is safe for tenants. Plus, you don't want to end up in legal trouble because something is faulty.
Exactly. And depending on where your property is, there might be environmental regulations too. Lead paint disclosures or asbestos.
Okay, there's a lot to keep track of. Any tips for navigating all this legal stuff?
The source recommends talking to a real estate attorney. They can give you specific advice and make sure you're up to date on all the laws.
Probably a good idea. Better safe than sorry. Right. Speaking of being safe, we should talk about insurance too.
Yes, insurance is essential for landlords. It protects you if something unexpected happens.
Like a fire or a natural disaster.
Exactly. But you need a specific landlord insurance policy, not just a regular homeowner's policy.
What's the difference?
Landlord insurance covers things like property damage, liability claims, and even loss of rental income.
So, if a tree falls on my rental property or a tenant accidentally starts a fire, landlord insurance helps cover the costs.
Exactly. It protects you from those financial blows. Oh, and the source also recommends requiring your tenants to have renter's insurance.
Renter's insurance, why is that important?
It protects their belongings and also provides liability coverage if someone gets injured on the property.
So it's a win-win, protecting both the landlord and the tenant.
Exactly. All right, we've covered budgeting, collecting rent, legal stuff, insurance. What are we missing?
Hmm. Let me think. Oh, taxes. Don't tell me there's a whole other layer of complexity when it comes to taxes and rental properties.
There is, but don't worry. The source reminds us that owning rental properties can actually have some tax advantages.
Really? I thought being a landlord meant paying a ton in taxes.
Not necessarily. You can usually deduct expenses related to the property.
Like what?
Mortgage interest, property taxes, insurance premiums, repair costs. All of those can be deducted from your rental income.
So those expenses we were carefully tracking could actually save us money on taxes.
Exactly. And then there are depreciation deductions. You can deduct the cost of the property over time.
Depreciation. This is where I start to feel like I need an accountant.
It can get a bit complex. The tax code isn't exactly known for being simple. The source recommends talking to a tax professional who specializes in real estate
Or maybe able to help us make sure we're doing everything right.
and maximizing those deductions. So we've covered a lot, but it's just a taste. The source goes into even more detail on each of these topics.
It's a lot to take in, but I'm starting to understand just how much goes into being a successful landlord. It's definitely more than just collecting rent checks.
It's a whole business, and there are so many moving parts. But when you get it right, the rewards can be great.
All right, we're back for the final part of our deep dive. We've covered a lot of ground, from tenant screening to lease agreements, budgeting, legal stuff, even taxes.
We've really gone through the whole gamut of being a landlord.
It's been a whirlwind, but I feel like I'm starting to get a better grasp of what it takes to be successful in cash flow real estate investing.
Me too. And, the source emphasizes one more important thing, leveraging resources and connecting with others.
So you're saying we don't have to do this alone?
Exactly. There's a ton of support out there. The source specifically mentions books and online courses.
Ah, the classics. But there are so many options. Any recommendations for someone just starting out?
For sure. Rich Dad, Poor Dad is a popular one. The book on rental property investing is another good one. And the ABCs of real estate investing is a solid choice too.
Those are great for foundational knowledge. What about online courses? Any platforms or instructors you'd suggest?
Definitely. Udemy, Coursera, Skillshare, they all offer a wide variety of real estate investing courses, often taught by experienced investors. You can even find courses on specific topics like tenant screening, lease agreements, managing properties, financing, all that good stuff.
Okay, so books and courses for learning the ropes. What else does the source mention?
Well, you're already doing one of the best things listening to real estate podcasts.
True, there are so many out there. Any favorites?
Bigger Pockets is a big one. The Real Estate Guys is another good one. And Invested is a really insightful one. They all feature interviews with successful investors, market analysis, practical tips.
Podcasts are a great way to keep learning even while you're on the go.
Absolutely.
But what about connecting with other investors in person? Does the source talk about that?
Yeah, they do. Networking is key, they say. Building relationships with other real estate investors is super valuable.
Networking can be a bit scary sometimes. Any suggestions for how to do it without feeling awkward?
Local real estate meetups are a good option, and there are tons of online forums too.
I like that idea. It's about finding your tribe, people who get it. But what do you actually talk about at those meetups?
Oh, all sorts of things. Sharing experiences, bouncing ideas off each other, maybe getting feedback on potential deals. You can even find partners for projects sometimes.
So it's a great way to learn from each other and avoid some common mistakes.
Exactly. And you build a support system, people who understand the challenges and can help you through them.
Having that network can make all the difference.
For sure. And don't forget about professionals like real estate agents, property managers, lawyers, accountants.
Right. Those experts can provide guidance and help you avoid costly pitfalls.
Exactly. Surround yourself with a good team and you'll be in much better shape.
All right, we've covered so much in this deep dive. What's the main takeaway you want our listeners to walk away with?
I think the key is understanding that cash flow real estate investing is a holistic endeavor. It's not just about one single task. It's about seeing how everything connects to create a thriving, profitable business.
It's like we've given our listeners a toolbox, and now it's their turn to build something amazing.
Exactly. And before we wrap up, one final thought. The source talks a lot about the practical and financial side of things, but I think it's important to remember that real estate is about more than just bricks and mortar.
It's about people.
Yes. It's about building communities, providing homes for people.
That's a good reminder. Sometimes we get so caught up in the numbers, we forget about the human side of it all.
Exactly. So as you build your real estate portfolio, think about how you can benefit the communities you invest in.
Think about providing quality, affordable housing, supporting local businesses, making a positive impact on your tenants and their neighborhoods.
It's about creating a positive ripple effect.
I love that.
Yeah,
Real estate investing can be so much more than just making money. It can be about making a difference.
absolutely. So with that in mind, let's wrap up this deep dive.
We hope you feel empowered and excited to start your own real estate investing journey.
Happy investing, everyone. We'll see you on our next deep dive.